All right, we're all getting settled in. Well, welcome to Crossroads Prison Ministries. My name is Aaron. I'm the communications director here. We're so glad that you're all here with us today to hear from our special guest speakers who have an amazing story to share with you this morning. It's my honor to introduce them. I got in contact with Chris Hoke in a kind of a strange way a couple of years ago through a bag of coffee, actually. At the time, he was working for a ministry in Washington State that was a coffee ministry. He was employing returning citizens out of prison, gang members, teaching them the trade of roasting coffee. And I came across one of his bags of coffee here at the office, and I mean, this is some good coffee right here. So I had to Google it, find out where this coffee was coming from, and I found out about Chris and his ministry and what he's doing in Washington State with prisoner population and gang members, and was just like, wow, he speaks our language. He's a guy that I feel like would really connect with our ministry. So I just shot him an email, and I noticed that he was going to be in Grand Rapids for a writers conference. He's also an author. And I just said, hey, while you're in the area, you should come by and meet us. And it worked out for him to actually give a talk here about a year ago, I believe. And he read from his book, Wanted. Maybe some of you actually got a chance to read his book, which was super powerful. And we've just kept in contact over the last year or so and been following him and admiring what he's doing from a distance and kind of exchanging emails here and there. And we're like, how cool would it be to partner someday on some of this stuff? And now we have this opportunity to have him come back, encourage our staff. It's been an exciting morning. We just brainstorming together, dreaming together, finding out what God's doing in their ministry and our ministry. And they just have like minds and like spirits. It's just a beautiful thing. I've been so encouraged, so challenged by them already. They're going to be recording some training videos for us, so for our mentors to really train us in how do we connect with our students in a really deep and meaningful way. So we're really excited about that. But now Chris and his buddy Neaners are here. This time around we get to have Neaners here, which I'm really, really excited about. They're going to share their story about how they connected while Neaners was in prison. He was there for 7.5 years and spent quite a that time in solitary confinement. And I'm not going to get too much into their story, but they connected through the mail in a really powerful and meaningful way. So now they're co-directors of Underground Ministries. So I'm going to invite up Chris and Neaners to share their story this morning. Give them a round of applause.
Good morning. It's good to be back. Is this right volume? All right, great. How many of you were here when I had the privilege of chatting at y'all like a year and a half ago? Cool. Well, Edward's been in touch with us. He's been emailing me articles, names of people that he loves who are incarcerated. It's good to be back, and I'm going to invite Neaners to come up in a minute, just because when we've come up together, and one person's just kind of standing there, it can feel kind of awkward. So we'll invite Neaners up in a sec. Aaron's asked us to share a little bit of our story about how we came to know each other, which is it's a little unique. It's a little unorthodox. I mean, for us, it's normal because it's all we know. But when we get to know other ministries that have all sorts of beautiful ways of connecting on both sides of the prison walls, we found that our story might be encouraging to engage even more. So a little bit of my story. I grew up a child of missionary grandparents. My parents were into missions. I grew up over-churched, as I like to say. Anyone here relate to that? Nobody over-churched here? Just the right amount? So I was just always itchy to not just be in a church, but to do the Jesus stuff, to hang out with the kind of people that Jesus was hanging out with, because it was beautiful, and it was risky, and it was scary. And I wanted to see the dead raised. I just didn't want to be part of a religious social club with people who looked like me. I wanted to be part of a crew that would be sent out in 2x2s into all the ends of the earth, and to be with the people who are condemned as prostitutes and tax collectors, or today we would say felons or no goods or pieces of blanks. These are the ones that Jesus really loved and was always hanging out with. And I just wanted to be close to Jesus. So my question was always, I wasn't trying to help people. I just want to be close with Jesus. I just want to kick it with this dude. And if Jesus were in my town, where would he be? So I think that's one of the deeper questions that's helped me reframe. It's not, well, I'm already really close with God, and I just want to go out and maybe help out the poor lost souls. But for me, it's still been a burning hunger to get closer to Jesus. Even though I said the sinner's prayer and I raised my hands in worship and I led other people in worship a lot in church, I wanted to be closer. And so I was thinking, if he were in my town, would I even know the parts of the neighborhoods that he was hanging out with? Does that make sense? Yeah, because there are a lot of people in Israel and in Galilee who are on their knees in the temple praying for the Messiah to come. And he was probably like 3 blocks away. And they're still waiting for the Messiah, and he's in town. How would they even know? And so I would always think about it that way. If he were in my town, would I even know who he's kicking it with? Would I even be able to recognize him? Would Jesus be walking by me in town? And I'd be like, no, Jesus is going to be floating on clouds and full of light just exploding out of his eyes. I think we have assumptions like that. Would we be comfortable with the tax collectors and the prostitutes in our time? And so when I finally found myself in a tiny county jail in Northwest Washington with a guy who was writing a book called Reading the Bible with the Damned. It's a good book. It's kind of technical. It's for seminary students, but help get seminary students to connect their biblical studies with the people Jesus was hanging out with. And what's good news with people that already feel cast out, that already feel it's too late for them. In that room, I met people that changed my life. There were oftentimes, I was earlier in my 20s, I had more hair back then. I have less now. They were younger guys who were my age in their early 20s, and they were angry, and they were smart, and they had no patience for just kind of small, fake conversation. They had real questions about the scriptures, and they put me on the spot and asked me really direct questions. I loved it, because I felt like these were the conversations I was wanting in church growing up. So I struck up a friendship with these guys, and that was the first step that probably took me off course from a traditional chaplaincy path, is I used the F word a lot, friend. And that's even scarier to a lot of folks. They hear the F word, you know, the other one that gets bleeped on television. Well, that's just crude, but you start really saying, these are my friends. Prison staff gets uncomfortable. Certain worldviews of ministry gets uncomfortable. But this was Jesus' prime identity to the people that he hung out with. Jesus, that friend of sinners. And that identity was a put down from the religious people. It's in Matthew's gospel. When friend of sinners, that was not like, oh, look at Jesus, he's a friend of sinners. They were just like, Jesus, that guy? The guy who kicks it with the screw-ups? He can't be the Messiah. He can't even be a respectable rabbi. He's with unclean people. So to be friends with the unclean, friends with the outcast, was Jesus' identity as a put down from some, and that's why he was important to others. And the friend of sinners that he was friends with probably didn't even know he was the Messiah. It's so interesting that he didn't spend so much time explaining to them the 4-point plan to salvation. And he came, and he could have. Why didn't he? He didn't say, hey, everybody, in a few years, I'm going to die on the cross, and this is the most important thing you need to know. So this is how you invite me into your heart right now. It was already happening. They were already welcoming him into their hearts. So the F word, friendship. That was the doorway that helped me enter a whole underground world of these guys that didn't just want prayer. And trust me, prayer in one-on-one visits with them connected me with God in a way that my private prayer time, my devotional time, I could never connect. But when I was with these guys and holding tattooed hands, and we both found ourselves crying, this just opened up my heart. And so for me, I made contact with Jesus by holding hands with felons and gang members. That was the sacrament and the touch and the feeling of Jesus' embrace with me. And then they started calling me back. They started calling me in the middle of the night, and I started getting calls at 1, 2 a.m. And most of them were this guy named Neaners. And Neaners did a lot of bad stuff. Neaners was a leader of a gang, and he had a lot of authority, and so he committed a lot of crime in the gang, but he loved all the homies. He loved all the youth in the valley. The people that we as biblical people should be finding and caring for, the widow, the orphan, the outcast, the fatherless. Those kids are everywhere. Those families are everywhere in our neighborhoods, and who recruits them first? As a gang leader, Neaners knew how to find the orphan, fatherless, and he'd reach out to them. And I'd oftentimes see him, while a gang member, take the shirt off his own back. Like he was following John the Baptist's basic commands first, more than any Christian I'd ever seen. And Neaners was recruiting these guys. And Neaners had the audacity to call me a pastor when that was still a bad word for me. He called me pastor to the gang members. And I said, no, I'm an activist theologian. And he's like, I don't know what that is. You're the pastor. And the homies, we've never had a pastor. It was like something they wanted. Maybe they didn't want to go be in a church the way that it's set up, but they did want a pastor. They did want a shepherd and someone to defend them and walk with them and love them and connect them with the heart of God. And so Neaners dragged me into the streets, said, you're the pastor, and connected me with all these guys. And then he got arrested and went off to prison. And while Neaners was off in prison, I'm still trying to go to court with these guys in small county jail, go fishing with them, pursuing them, going to their apartments, staying late night, taking phone calls and getting them out of bad situations. But Neaners was writing me letters from prison. And for about 7.5 years, we wrote weekly letters. And Neaners was my mentor. Neaners taught me about the streets. Neaners taught me about the world that God has been trying to teach me about. And that God was trying to take me deeper into the underground. I wasn't trying to just mentor inmates back into white mainstream Protestant society. God was trying to mentor me into the underworld, because that's where the church is going. So I have the privilege now of, after having stuck with Neaners these years and him sticking with me, he got out of prison and came home, moved into my home with my wife and I. Because he had a call. He didn't just want to do good or just try to read the Bible and not just leave the gangs. But he said, if I'm going to leave the gangs, I'm going to do what you do, Doug. And I think he knew he could probably do it better than me. That he knew his people. He knew the streets. He knew the underground. And Neaners' plan from the day he got out of prison was not just to start doing good, but that we would start working together. And so it's my pleasure that now we are starting a new organization as co-directors. One isn't supervising the other, but we're partners. As Jesus sends his disciples as 2 by 2, we're co-directors of Underground Ministries now. And I get to get on airplanes with Neaners. And when our flight gets canceled, we get to rent a car together and drive up to the distant lands of Grand Rapids. And I get to introduce you guys to my teacher and my mentor, Neaner Garcia. So please welcome him. I'll take this.
Good morning. Pretty nervous. This is my crowd. This is my people. I didn't get the privilege of knowing a lot about certain denominations and churches, Presbyterian, Lutherans, Methodists. I didn't get to know a lot about that. So one of the things that I did get to know is that there's some really beautiful people out there that love who I am for who I am. Sorry. Right there. Ready? Hello? We good? All right. So, well, I got the privilege of getting to know folks like from this really good small church. Before I met them, I was in solitary confinement for 5.5 years. Do you guys know what solitary confinement is? Yes. It's a little cell that's probably as big as this right here. Literally, this is my cell right here. I had to be in a cell like that for 23 hours a day, and I got the privilege of coming out 1 hour, 5 hours a week, 20 hours a month. So how many of you guys think could live in a cell this big with a toilet, a bed, and no family, no friends? Feeling like nobody loves you. While I sat in this cell, 2 of my brothers passed away. One 28, the other one 30. My dad passed away at 40-something. Never knew him, but he passed away. My mom was deported to Mexico. So I sat in the cell like this big, 23 hours, like I am right now, pacing back and forth, thinking these things. As I call home to Chris, who would write me once a week for 7 years and accept my collect call would tell me of another homie dying, or another homie in prison, or another homie in jail. So this was my life. For out of the 7.5 years I was in prison, 5.5 years of that, 5 to 5.5 was in this. With an all white walls, same color, blankets, white jumpsuit, no sun, no friends, no family, nobody to love me. Me not knowing how to love myself. I had one privilege though. I met a lot of other guys that were just like me in the same situation, same scenario. I'm not from Washington. I'm not born in Washington. I'm a migrant worker. My family grew up as migrant workers. We traveled all over from here to Mexico, Texas, El Paso, Texas, to Juarez, to California. We worked in the fields. Oregon. My papers say I'm born in Oregon, but I don't remember Oregon. But so I didn't have the privilege that a lot of other folks did to stay and be committed to one school, or to have the same friend for the next 3, 4, 5 years. I didn't get that privilege. I didn't get the privilege to have a teacher who would help me learn how to do 2 plus 2, or 4 plus 1, or 5 plus 10. I learned that by selling drugs for my mom. I didn't get the privilege that a lot of other folks did to play dodgeball in school, or catch with my dad, or my uncle, my cousin, or my brother. The only thing I was dodging was bullets from my neighborhood rival gang members that were just a block away, or a fence away, or playing catch me if you can with the cops as they're trying to chase me because I'm a little 10-year-old kid, or 11-year-old kid, or 12-year-old kid who just committed a horrific crime. I didn't get that privilege. I also didn't get the privilege of knowing my family as well as I wish I could have, as my brothers were in the same situation as me, locked up, jails, prisons, or deported. So I got raised by my sister who was 1 year older than me. And one of the memories that I have with her was us living in Oregon. I don't remember Oregon so well, but us being at my dad's house. My mom got deported, so I'm sitting in Oregon. My dad's house. My dad's married to another woman. I'm pretty young. He's got 3 kids, stepkids. So they're my stepbrothers now all of a sudden. And I remember, do you guys know what marbles are? I love them. They call them canicas in Spanish. So marbles. So I remember playing marbles and this guy stealing my sister's marbles. I remember that. And I remember beating up that little baby, that kid, the boy, my stepbrother. I remember beating him up. Mad. And my dad asked me, why are you so mad? ¿Por qué estás enojado? Why are you mad? You're asking me why I'm mad? I'm just a little boy who you got sleeping in the laundry room because your wife won't let me sleep inside the house with the dog that I can't even eat inside the house or get water from the house. That I have to get water out of a hose faucet. And you're asking me why I'm mad? I remember being a little kid and get shipped on a bus from Portland, Oregon, all the way to Mount Vernon, and not knowing where the hell I'm gonna end up at. But getting to a neighborhood called Stanford Drive that I knew so well that I was like, this is my house, this is my home. And being taken in, embraced by an uncle that was gay, but was really good and took care of me. I remember that. I remember these stories like they just happened the other day. So these stories are just a few of what most of the homies that are in the same tier with me go through. So I sit in this cell, this big, and replay these memories in my head and try to figure out how not to go crazy and how not to allow my homies to go crazy because I love them. So I noticed that while I was in prison, I would watch the commissary, the mailman, I'd watch it all. You know what I mean? I got nothing else to do but to look outside my door and see what's going on in the tier. Can't see my homies, but I know they're down the hall because we talk on the tier for a while. So what I did was I would get the commissary store and look at what had the most in a bag for the cheapest price, because you get $9.90 a week. How many of you guys can live $9.90 a week? Coffee costs like $6 nowadays. So it's like $9.90. So you get this every week. So I'd get this bag called, you guys know what fireballs are? I'd get these atomic fireballs. And my coffee, a little bag like that, Keefy coffee, probably not good. It's instant coffee. And like from learning how to make vendors for my mom to sell drugs, I made them little vendors full of coffee, crushed up the fireballs. You know how they're in little plastics? They sell them in little plastics, so I'd sit there for hours, crush them. Put them all on the table, on the desk, my little desk. That overlaps where my head sleeps, so sometimes I would bump my head when I'd wake up in the morning and they'd say to stand on the line, because there's a line that you have to stand on so that the guards can see you, and you can't be up against the door, so they have to see you. So I'd sometimes bump my head because they're like, it's roll call, so I'd have to get up really quick and just stand right there and wait for them as they do picture count. So I put them on my desk, take off my white jumpsuit, my sandals, my socks, and my underwears. And I grabbed my comb. I didn't have hair, I was bald. I mean, there's some pictures, we don't have them up today, but I'd take out all the strings from the underwears, one at a time, because I need every single one of those threads. And I'd take out every one of the threads from the socks, because I needed every single one. And I'd intertwine them together. I spent hours. I don't say this a lot, but I would grab these strings and literally like 5 of them, and then they'd be like from right here to right here. And I'd sit there with a toothpaste, with a staple at the end that I'd sneak a staple. I'd find a staple somewhere. I forgot where. It would either come in through some letter or something, but I'd sneak it and I'd spin it for hours. And that's how you know someone's twining string, because that's all you hear. I would do that for hours. Then I would interlock them all, tie them to my comb. I'd caught a monster on the top tier, caught a Batman, caught an Oscar, caught all the homies. Like, we're about to go fishing. You guys know what fishing is, right? Well, in there we call it fishing too. So I would grab my comb, pull up my jumpsuit, get down on my knees, and sit there for hours, because underneath the crack of a door, there's a little slit about this big. It's like the closest thing we get to freedom. It's the only thing we have to freedom is this slit underneath the door. And I'd shoot this comb out. Sometimes it'd hit the top and I'd get mad. I'd smack my fingers, I'd get mad. So many things would get me frustrated. So many things would get me mad. So many reasons why I would have been like, I'm done. I'm not doing this. I'm not gonna risk my level. I'm not gonna risk my release. I'm not gonna risk anything. But nah, I love these men. All these men have a similar story as I did, or even more horrific than mine. I'd throw my string out there far. They'd throw theirs out. Mantra would be like, you guys are on top of each other, you're good. Pull. And then one guy on the top tier would direct the whole movement. He'd be like, move this way, go, pull a little, just a little, slow, all the way till our combs were locked to the strings and would have something to go back and forth on. And I'd bring him all the way in, grab his line, take off the 2 combs and interlock those lines, tighten them tight. Remember my little vendors, my vendors of coffee and fireballs, I would connect them on there. And I do it with every homie, about 15 to 20 homies on my tier. I'd do this I spend my whole day, not that I had to, but that I got to. I get to do this. I was blessed with the commissary, that I got a letter from my boy right here with the money order to buy it, that I got a chance to do this. And I would do this to everyone until they were all had their vendors and coffee and fireballs. And then we'd get our coffee. All you hear is, next thing you know, you just hear that water button going, the hot water getting, so it warms up the water so we can get our coffee ready. And everybody would be like, bubbly time. And so I would call out every name on the tier, every homie, Batman, Casper, Spooky, da-da-da-da-da-da, all the way to everybody, yeah. You at the line? Yeah, we at the line. All right, what's good? Salute, like cheers, chug it. And that would be our day. Once a week, I got the privilege to do that with these folks. Once a week. I never forgot that.
So the story that Neaners was telling you right now, is this on again? Is he was telling me, I think this is the more elaborated version. He was telling me a really brief version when I visited him. I got a rare special visit to visit him in solitary confinement through the glass. And while he was telling me about this, like you all, I haven't been inside a IMU or intensive management tier, so I had to imagine it like you all right now. And because I'm spent a lifetime in church, and I'm the kind of dorky guy that thinks seminary classes are fun, I'm hearing all this through kind of the lens of Bible and seminary, and I'm thinking, wow, I'm picturing those little crushed fireball packets sliding underneath the doors, thinking, man, that, in my mind, looks a lot like a communion wafer. And then it went from like aha to like, oh, that communion and Eucharist is happening in the most intensely designed system of isolation that the modern world has invented. And that Neaners was authoring fellowship and connecting worlds and dividing through walls that divide us, connecting worlds. And he was giving them a taste of something. And right as my mind is spinning, looking at him through the scratched glass and telling me this story, he's still talking while my mind's racing on these things. And he says, but you got to understand, Chris, when that fireball slides underneath their door, these guys don't have anyone writing them. These guys don't have a pastor. They don't have anyone sending them. Their families all cut them off, forgot them. They've burned all their bridges. So when that little fireball comes in, it's not just a fireball, bro. That's love. I thought, well, that's a sacramental theology right there. That's something like what we as Protestants are a little suspicious of, these Catholics. They're thinking, that little wafer, is that really Jesus' body? But I think Neaners had a priestly imagination. That he was saying, look, this is love. There's something going on here that is more than candy, just like what is happening in church is more than really bad juice and bad bread. That there is something that ties us together in receiving the living body and substance of God relationally from another that binds us together. And the more I thought about this as months and years went on is, well, if that's church, can church happen in hell? And so I had to kind of outgrow the theology that I grew up with and went way back to the beginning, to the early church and the Orthodox theology, and all their icons are rarely about Jesus on a cross. So the first 300 years, that wasn't their emphasis. The main icons, the theology of the early church, most of them didn't have books. They didn't have the printing press, right? And so they didn't give everyone a Bible. They had a lot of art. And art was their way to educate theology. And the icons of the early church are of Jesus breaking out of the underworld. And the ground beneath him is opened. And it's all darkness and shadows and people in the underworld. And Jesus is breaking open the underworld, and there's little keys and locks scattered everywhere. And right underneath Jesus' feet in the icon of the resurrection, it looks like little French doors. And as I started asking priests and early church theologians, what are these funny little kind of surfboards under Jesus' feet? And they said, that's the founding of the church. I'm like, what's that? There was no steeple, there was no cross. What do you mean the founding of the church? It said right there, Matthew 16, verse 18. I'm sure we all have it memorized. When Jesus founds the church, he says to Peter, well, what's Peter mean? So what was his real name? Simon. Okay, so the church begins with Jesus consorting with someone that has a secondary tough street name. So he says, all right, on you, rock, I build my ecclesia. That's a word for church. And ecclesia means assembly, gathering. Some people say it was like a political movement. So my posse, my movement, my people, my mission, my ecclesia, rock, I base it on you, ... And the gates of Hades, the underworld of hell, will not stand against it. So they said that's it right there. The resurrection, Christ is breaking open the barrier of hell. God is trying to get into hell, and he's trying to break us with him into hell, to smash open the gates of hell, so that the kingdom of God normally comes from heaven to earth, and from earth into the darkest regions of the world, so that the light may penetrate all darkness. And so Neaner's priestly activity in an American institutional hell has changed my theology, has opened me and taken me back in time into a much more expansive good news, so that I want to be part of Jesus' movement. I want to be part of Jesus' church, his ecclesia, which is already defying the walls of Hades. And why a ministry like Crossroads inspires me is you guys are already doing that. Our brains can catch up later. The theology can catch up later. You guys are already doing it. Downstairs, you've got all sorts of paper that are a lot like fireballs. It's a lot like Neaner's underwear threads. You guys got a massive operation. I mean, Neaner's talking about his 15 vendors of pieces of paper, and it takes time, and you got to line them all up and shoot them out to each cell. That's what you guys are doing. You guys are like the advanced structure of what Neaner's was doing the whole. And you guys are sending these across states, across denominations, across race, into all sorts of prisons. And you guys are penetrating every corridor of American hell today. And remember, when Jesus said to Peter, the gates of Hades will not stand against us. The gates can't keep us out, Peter. It can't keep us out. He didn't say, after you die. He didn't have this understanding of Hades and hell like an afterworld location you go to. Jesus' imagination, when he talks about Hades, he talks about it like it's now. Just like when Jesus says the kingdom of heaven, he wasn't talking about after you die. That too, it's eternal. But Jesus is talking about teaching us to pray, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Same thing when we're talking about the realm of the enemy, this realm of captivity and darkness. It's here and now also. And so this is the hell that we get to defy now. And the victory and the resurrection of Christ is what we're practicing already. And so I just want to encourage you that this is what Jesus is already up to, but we get to tie into that thread by doing that. We get to be part of that long line of threads. The money that was coming onto my account that I bought the money orders with and put them into envelopes and licked it up and sent to Neaner's, and he bought the commissary of the fireballs. All that was a long thread connected to lots of different churches. And so we're part of that movement. And you can't always see it. It's not just when the bodies are gathered like right now or in a church on Sunday morning. Being part of that line of connections that are defying hell, that's the movement, and it's hidden. And the ruler of this world can't always see it, just like the guards didn't always see the fireball shooting around the ground. So the ruler of this world doesn't always see what we're doing. But I want to just put that light of attention on it now that you're part of it, and to just delight in it. And as Neaner says, he didn't have those privileges of American wealth and society and upper middle class privileges, but he said, did you notice the words Neaner was using? He said, but I have the privilege of connecting with these guys. So that's a kingdom privilege. Maybe not wealth and neighborhood privilege, but we have the privilege of connecting with Jesus in this beautiful mission to connect with our brothers and sisters underground, so that we could be part of that icon in 2017. So thank you so much for inviting us. We get to be part of more conversations with you all, but we want to give a little bit of time just to turn from monologue to dialogue, that we can have a little bit of a Q&A and conversation. We still have time for that? Cool.
Recently, I was at a booth at a college ministry fair where, promoting Crossroads and trying to get younger people involved in our mission. And one of the young ladies came up to me and said, so all you really do is send Bible lessons and letters into prison? That's all you do? That's your entire ministry? And I looked at her kind of puzzlingly and said, did you know how much value a letter has to these people? They have nothing. And their story really captures that how much meaning there is in each letter that we send, in each Bible lesson that we send. It's love. So I just want to encourage everyone to remember that. Keep that in mind as those of you who are mentors. Every time that you write a letter, every time you offer up a prayer for your student, it is incredibly meaningful, and it's love for that individual. So Thank you to Chris and Neaners for sharing your story. Your story is our story. It's beautiful. But I just wanted to open it up for some time of questions and answers. If anyone has any questions for Chris and Neaners at this point, I'll give you the microphone if you want to ask a question.
I have one. I'm pretty sure they can hear me.
We got it on.
I'm not sure how you guys met.
And we were both students at Duke Divinity. No, I was in jail, and he was a chaplain playing a guitar.
Okay.
Yeah,
In the county jail before
county jail.
before he got shipped off to prison. We stayed in touch.
yeah, writing letters. Sorry, we're married. Also. I see you, Terry.
Oh, thanks. We like them. Don't be shy. Even if you're like, I don't know about something they said. Let's explore it together. Let's learn from each other.
Do you have newsletters?
You
Do you
have-
put out a newsletter?
We put out a monthly email to most of our donors and whoever wants to sign on to our newsletter. And we have a sign-up sheet.
It's in the car.
It's in the car. We're halfway there. We'll bring it up later on today, and if you guys want to sign up on our sheet, we're like to read our newsletters. I just did my first one the other day. Usually Chris has been the one that does them, and since we're starting a new organization, we're doing them together.
Because then I can pray differently because I know what's going on, right?
We need that.
We need that.
Thank you.
We all need that.
Okay.
We paid Terry to ask that question.
Go ahead. I just wanted to follow up.
One of the things we talked about yesterday is these guys have a real desire to help churches adopt a model, if you will, or a culture in their church that would be very friendly to people that are coming home. And they've kind of got this thought of one parish connected to one prisoner. And we've just talked about how our network really touches thousands of churches across the United States. And so we started having conversations about how we might be able to open up some of our church networks,
Yeah.
and they might be able to do some of the training and some of the empowerment of local churches to support some of the men and women that we're serving when they come home. So I think that's an exciting possibility in our future. And so we'd be interested in you following their ministry as well.
I'd be curious, is there anyone who's writing with someone who's incarcerated who's being released to your county?
So I am the program director for the Catholic Diocese.
Cool.
The Jail Ministry. We do all kinds of stuff on the inside in 23 facilities in our diocese, but we also receive letters regularly who are being released to the diocese, and we currently are now just launched a reentry outreach ministry called
Awesome.
Grow.
Grow?
Grow.
Okay.
Guiding returning citizens to our world, and what we'll do now, we have over 200 active volunteers in the facilities, but now we're going to train more volunteers so that when we receive these letters, find the perfect fit, the perfect faith community, and really walk and mentor their faith journey. Grand Rapids, this area we have 152 support service agencies. We're inundated with, there's clothing, there's healthcare, employment, all of these things. And we work with GRPD, we work with other Ottawa County, so there's all these services that we're meeting the needs of those, but the spiritual needs. It's so many times not walking that spiritual journey. So that faith community, that faith home, and that's what we're very excited about now. So we receive numerous letters, numerous phone calls throughout the year from family members of individuals who are approaching their release date.
Great.
And I can provide them all the material needs and refer them to a lot, even housing, lots of housing for CSCs. There's all kinds of things that we offer. But right now, I can't confidently say, pair them up with which will be Grow volunteers and have them walk that journey with them. That's where I think in this town of Steeples, we really lack that. And it's interesting because I think there's a lot of people that are much more comfortable going to prison. I mean, going to prison, doing these services with them, meeting with them, but then really taking that to the next level.
Yeah.
When they return. And we know, we all know the statistics of those that attend religious services on the inside, followed with the faith community on the outside, the recidivism rate is so much smaller than those. So I would like to learn more about what you guys are doing in that model.
Let me talk about where I felt convicted to bring me home, and then you talk about the Cedar Valley Church. Okay. So
like that, don't you? It's our little huddle.
For me, it was, I mean, God had to really shake me up. I mean, we were really aware of conversion experiences for those who were in prison, and that we think we're already converted. We got it. We're going to heaven. We know the Bible. We've been going to church. How can I help someone else? But oftentimes you see the real heart-wrenching conversions in the Bible happen with the insiders. The prophets have the hardest word for the insiders. And so for me, I was writing with Neaners for years. We were already close. We were already in that place of deep relationship. But he was getting out in a couple years, and I looked forward to him being out. I would have liked to catch up with him and maybe have some coffee or go fishing with him. But I also wanted to go to divinity school, because that's what you do when you do ministry. You go get a professional degree, and you advance your career. And so I was looking at applying to a few divinity schools, but I kind of had in the back of my mind, I think Neaner's release date. I think I'll be in North Carolina. Damn. And then I watched a Clint Eastwood movie. You ever seen Gran Torino? Raise your hand if you've seen that movie. I welcome everyone to watch that movie. It struck me to my core because I saw this guy who had bad theology, no theology. He was racist, he was mean, he was a jerk, he was a traumatized Vietnam veteran. He lived in a neighborhood in Detroit. Oh, it's right here in Michigan. That was going through a generational shift, and there were all these Hmong people moving into the neighborhood, and so he called them all gooks. And he was like the least missional and the least Christ-like person ever. But through this one altercation with his Hmong neighbors and some Hmong gangs going on, he ends up having to be stuck with this one kid that like ruined his shrubs. And so he says, I'm gonna make you wash my car. But so through the worst motives too. So bad attitude, bad heart, bad neighborhood, bad motives, but relationship began. And as he started hanging out with this kid, he started wanting to defend this kid. And he started wanting to stick up for him, and he started wanting to teach him things. And it's totally changing this guy. Until by the end, he ends up doing this very Christ-like thing, which affects the whole neighborhood in a very sacrificial, Christ-like move. But it all happened through one relationship. And at the end, I'm sitting there thinking, man, this dude impacted his neighborhood more than I'm impacting the homies in my valley, because he brought one guy into his life, and he adopted him into his life. And I thought, God, who should I adopt into my life, Lord? Be careful when you ask that, because God will give you an answer. And right away, as the credits are rolling, I felt God just say, Neaners. And I'm like, yeah, about that. I'm going to seminary, Lord. And I felt God say, well, don't go to seminary. He's coming home. You know his arithmetic. You already have your answer, Chris. And so a dialogue happened in my heart as the credits for a Clint Eastwood movie are rolling. And I said, yeah, but I'm supposed to go be a pastor, God, right? And I felt God say, well, what do you want to go to seminary for? You want to learn the Bible better? You stick with Jose Israel Garcia till the wheels fall off and you don't let go of him, you'll read the Bible better. You want to learn how to be a pastor? You walk through the years ahead with this guy, you will be better than any seminary can train you, I assure you that. And then I felt God get a little pointed with me. Chris, you want a few letters after your name? You want a degree? Do you think some doors will open to you because you have a few letters after your name? I felt God say, you have a redeemed Jose Israel Garcia at your side. I'll open any door you want. So back to what I'm asking you to do, Chris. Take my son in. And so then I have to talk to my parents. So I'm undoing my seminary applications, Mom and Dad. So, hey, Rachel, I think we need to take this guy I'm writing letters with into our home. See, what I'm getting at is the conversion is just as difficult for us as what we're asking people in prison. And until the church undergoes its own conversion, I think the prison system is going to stay where it's at. And we can't just talk about personal responsibility for inmates if we don't take personal responsibility. And if we can't invite people to leave their gangs, leave the streets, leave their comfort zone for the gospel, if we haven't left anything for it. And so I think this is the mutuality that we preach. We start thinking that we've got the answers. And like Ananias, who welcomes Saul into his house, Ananias ends up being a nobody. Saul, that scary offender that used to terrorize the Christians, he becomes the apostle that writes half the New Testament. And so God had to say, not only are you going to help this guy Neaners, Chris, but I have a calling for him that's bigger than yours. So we have to die to our ego. We have to die to our white privilege. We have to die to our assumption of what church leadership looks like in the 21st century. I think it looks more like Neaners than me or you. So how do we get to welcome in the future apostles that we're already riding with? And if we're going to challenge them on their faith, want to challenge them and invite Jesus into their heart, are we willing to welcome that person into our homes? Ah, but Chris, you can't for all these reasons. Okay, cool. Inmates have the reasons not to invite Jesus into their heart either. So we get to be the ambassadors for a greater gospel. We get to go back to our churches and say, hey, I'm writing this person. Let's start a 2-year conversation like I did with my wife about bringing this guy home. Do everything that it takes. And every question in us that says no is our area of discipleship. So, sorry, I'm getting chills right now. I haven't talked about this in public ever.
You mentioned that you were hoping to work with churches to encourage them to welcome returning citizens.
Yes.
Can you tell us about any success stories along those lines?
Well, go for it.
It's crazy. We got
Tell me where we're at with OPOP.
we have a Catholic Archdiocese on our board, and that's one of our pilot churches. And I know a lot of people really get intimidated and are scared of this, of bringing someone like this home. But I think it's deeper than this and that. I walk. I'll have Chris tell you a little bit about OPOP. But I walk into this Fred Meyer. I go to a really big building church with a small congregation that they say is dying out, full of 20 to 25 elderly folks that are no younger than 60. They're Presbyterians. And I started going there with Chris when Chris was like, oh man, he's not going to like this. This isn't going to feel right. And I felt more called to be with these folks than I've ever been. I've been to Christ the King, which is like Crossroads. I've been to all kinds of other churches, and I'm not knocking them, but I just felt a deep connection to these folks. That now when I walk into a store at Fred Meyer's and they see me, and I'm talking about 83, 84, 85, and they're like, Neaners! And I'm with some homies and stuff, and these dudes are straight, like, dug down. We're like, oh, what's up? That's what's up. And we go up and we embrace them, and you get all these looks from other folks like, how's this old lady know this? This dude's dug down. But that's the beginning of what OPOP is, what we want OPOP to be.
What's OPOP?
OPOP is one parish, one prisoner. We believe, and I'll let Chris take it from here.
I wasn't trying to take it, I just, OPOP, one parish, one prisoner.
It's one parish, one prisoner. We believe that to every inmate in Washington State, there's a church that can help him not rehabilitate, because I think that word, I don't know, we can help him reintegrate, because nobody can help rehabilitate, you can only help yourself rehabilitate, but reintegrate to the community and help them to get started in a new chapter in their life, and as well as learn how to help them. Because if we go in with thinking that we're going to save all these dudes and we're helping them and we're doing this for them, we got this backwards.
Yeah, so we're just figuring it out, because a lot of what Neaners and I have known is just our experience. But we found if we're going to move forward, those that we're serving probably they don't deserve and they don't need anything less than what Neaner's got. So if we really want to think about learning from our experience, we can't take in everybody. So it came from when someone told us that, yeah, there's the same amount of churches in Washington State as inmates. So just mathematically, if every church took in one person, you'd empty the prison system, and I think the witness of the church would be resurrected. It would change every church. And so, sorry, go ahead.
Just like to make a follow-up comment on that. When I first heard that slogan, one parish, one prisoner,
Yeah.
I thought, man, a parish can handle way more than that. And I don't think so after hearing how much work that involves.
It's a lot of work. But the work becomes sustainable if there's relationship. And so we're just starting our first pilot training. We've got a tiny Methodist church, a medium-sized Presbyterian church, and a massive Jesuit Catholic church, rural and urban, and they're coming to our first orientation. And we're just making it up as we go. And so there's going to be some mistakes. We've talked with some guys that we're like, hey, you're going to be a guinea pig. We love you, and you're more than a guinea pig, but like we're going to make some mistakes, and we're going to need you to help us learn. We're going to figure this out together. But one of the things that we're wanting to do is to say, down the road, our pilot version, it's only a year from their release, so we're going to abbreviate it. But ideally, we would want to connect a church with a willing person 3 years before the release. So there's time for letters for what you guys are doing. There's time for trust to build, for the honeymoon phase to go over, and for broken trust and rupture and repair, and to get to know one another, to identify their needs upon reentry. And for the 5 stakeholders in the church, just like 5 fingers in a hand, when you're first helping someone across a bridge, there's that first hand and then the full embrace. So the 5 people to be in contact with that person, and then they also bring those needs back to the church. They're prayed for every service, and they give updates about how they're doing, and they start identifying, okay, for the next 3 years, we have 3 years to figure out a living situation for this guy. We have 3 years to figure out a used car. Think we can do that, body of Christ? I think we can. And so I think that'll bring community together. A lot of people look for projects to do rather than just, painting somewhere downtown. They can all love someone together. So that's the vision, but we haven't done it as a program yet. So pray for us, and maybe in a couple of years we'll have a model and a website and some stories. Any other thoughts?
When you're talking about that 3 years, you're talking about mentors going into a prison to visit with that prisoner for 3 years before he comes out?
Hopefully they get to the visit soon, but it would have to start with letters for a while.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because there are some prisons where mentors can go in. I think in Georgia, there's some of the larger prisons there. The churches have mentors that go in weekly, monthly, I don't know how often. But they're building long-term relationships before these people get out.
Yeah, and the way we're designing in our valley, they wouldn't need to have a special visiting status. They would just get on their visiting list, like a girlfriend or an aunt or boyfriend. Any other thoughts? Is this good news? Is this scary?
Are you guys familiar with, we just had Father Greg Boyle from Homeboy Industries.
He's our hero.
He was just here, and he's phenomenal. Yeah. You're doing what he's doing.
I think our kids will know him as Saint Greg.
Yes, I think so too. I do.
Yeah, he'll be canonized, I think.
Yeah, definitely do. So you remind me of him and what you're doing.
Well, we've been trying to copy him.
There's so much, just in Grand Rapids here, we have GRPD are you familiar with the CLEAR program? It's called CLEAR, it's for returning citizens, and there's a women's CLEAR group, and there's a men's CLEAR group, and they meet weekly, and Officer Ruth Walters runs the women's, Officer Dan Myers, and it's accountability group is really what it is. It's the highlight of my week. I hear you of the theology, you can go to school so much, you can go to sit in class so much, but I learn more at the CLEAR meetings than I do anywhere else that I've ever learned from a book. It's It's wardens, it's officers, it's prosecutors, it's returning citizens, people who've done horrific things. It's support agencies all coming together weekly, journeying together, helping. In the men's clear group here in Grand Rapids, sometimes there's 40 individuals at any given meeting. Good stuff. That oftentimes I feel like we're overlapping a lot instead of pooling our resources together, and really that's how we can help more people.
Yeah, and I mean, speaking of just that mutual transformation, that it's on our part too, that I oftentimes for years wanted to see gang members get along. They'd be like, no, Chris, I don't mix with them. Like, no, like I'd paint a beautiful gospel picture of, all of enemies getting along, and until guys would be like, so what's a Presbyterian? What's a Pentecostal? Oh, well, they're kind of different. They're kind of this. I'd be like, oh, so you're kind of like different gangs. Oh. Oh. Well, you got to understand, their theology is a little different. We don't believe this. But until we learn how to work together, different agencies, to hang out with the Buddhists, they don't have to believe the same thing. But Jesus is talking about eating with Samaritans. And those were like Buddhists to them back then. They're like, they don't have any good temple theology. But Jesus is just like, I'm not talking about that. And so that we can learn to cooperate as agencies, as different churches, as different denominations, I think this is what is pleasing to God. And this is what models the gospel to people that we would want to see them have rival gangs get along. Again, us just practicing what we preach, but we only know how to do that as we work with others so different than us.
Unity, not uniformity.
Unity, not uniformity. I like that.
It's a beautiful way of wrapping things up, talking about unity and reconciliation, bringing people together, partnering to make a difference. Chris, you mind closing us in prayer?
I'll pass that to Neaners.
Neaners.
My boy, I did it the last 2 times. Your turn, see?
All right, I invite you guys to close your eyes and take a deep breath. I invite you guys to open your hands. Careful what happens when we say yes to God. Lord, we want to hear you. Thank you for inviting us this far. We invite you to come into our heart, but now we're realizing what that might mean, how big you are, and how terrifying and beautiful your mission is. Speak to us now. Maybe it's nothing that Neaners and I shared today, but you've got someone on our minds. Break our hearts. Show us where the next level of discipleship is for us. Bring to mind the people you want us to get involved. Forgive us for our fear of love. Forgive us our professional boundaries. Forgive us our culture's ways of saying no to you. We just surrender to you, Lord Jesus. Your ways are even better than our best ways. Teach us. We pray together, our Father, who is in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us today our daily bread, and forgive us our sins, as we forgive those who sin against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For yours is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Thank you, guys.
Thank you again to Chris and Neaners. Give them a round of applause. It was so encouraging to hear their story. And for those of you who are Crossroads supporters, be looking for the videos coming out soon. They're going to tell more of their story and give us just real practical tips on how to connect with prisoners in a real deep and meaningful way. So thank you all for coming today.